Welcome to lunchtime Yin Yoga. And the way that I'm going to start today is lying down with a rolled up blanket under my back. So I have a lot of different pillows and props here that I will rely on in a bit. I think for today's class, a couple of throw pillows or a yoga bolster, a blanket will be handy. So to do this thing with my back, I'm going to fold my blanket and then I'm going to roll it kind of so it has like a little miniature bolster kind of size. Big enough for my back, but not too thick. I like this kind of oval shape most of the time for what we're about to do. This is going to go crossways. So it's like a fish pose, but held by the blanket. So I'm going to put that right about where for me is bra strap level. So just a little bit under the shoulder blades. And then I'm going to let my arms, I need to get a little higher. I'm going to let my arms relax out like a cactus or like a T. And if you're like me and you've got kind of a short neck, then another blanket that supports your head or a little eye pillow or something like that is really useful. Just so you have a landing pad for your head. Now you can also just hang and the top of the head will eventually potentially touch the floor. But usually for me, I need just that little extra. Okay, so here's how we'll begin. So there's this expansion across the chest. We're in a little baby. It's like an upside down cobra, essentially, is what the fish pose is. And there are other aspects to the yang style fish pose where you engage through the core and elevate the legs and arms. But for our purposes, we're going for the sense of release and space around the muscles in the chest, in the ribs, and then that low back back bend compression sensation. Not too much, just enough. And we'll stay here for a couple more minutes. I like to emphasize the breath once I've settled in, once I've got the props where I want them. I want that deep, smooth, rhythmic breath. Thanks for joining me here, yogis. We're going to stay for about one more minute. If this is your first trip into the yin world, everything is much slower. There might be a flow to it where one pose might sort of meld into another, but it's more, if continental drift is a flow, that's more the speed. Nice and slow. Nice deep breaths, letting the rib cage float with the inhales. So we've got about 2 more big breaths. Now I'm going to reach my arms up over my head and create just a little bit of a long stretch. And then I'm going to give myself a moment to roll onto one side, slide that blanket out, and then come on back onto your back. Oh, just so we can experience the sort of after effect of having had the chest elevated. So usually for me, this is very pleasant. Everything just sort of feels like it melts and spreads out. Sometimes, like today, I can kind of feel it's almost like that impression is still there. My back is taking some time to reshape itself. Oh, my little windshield wipers with the legs are nice. You can even bring the knees in and sort of rock on that area where the blanket or bolster was. Oh. All right, so we're going to do something almost the same, but laying on our side. So you can use the same blanket. You could use a yoga bolster. You could use a pillow. I'm going to stay with the same blanket, and then I'll use the other props to make it more comfortable. So I'm going to put that underneath my rib cage so that now the elevation is happening sideways instead of like a back bend. And again, I like support for my head, so that's where a throw pillow comes in because it's a little bit far down. I like to take my top arm and kind of drape it up over my ear. If this is too spicy, you can try just allowing the arm to drape over the hip, or you can build yourself a little yoga prop mountain up front, couple pillows, a bolster, whatever you got, some blocks, and let your arm rest out to the side. Now, for the legs, you can extend them all the way out. You can keep the bottom leg bent. It's a little more sturdy, and just extend the top leg. And that feels the best to me because I can rest my shin on my ankle or my foot, and then my knee doesn't experience quite so much sensation on the inner edge of the knee, but it allows me to really feel this IT band kind of area right there on that upper hip. Oh, outer hip. And so once you've configured your legs, you've kind of swung them. You can swing them forward or back to kind of find the exact right amount of sensation there. And then allow the shoulder to find a home. Just let yourself get heavy. And we'll stay for a couple more minutes. Nice deep breaths. Just adjusting for some technical points. Hopefully the mic is still picking up my voice. So we're going to stay on this side for one more minute. So we're going to take a nice big breath. Let go with a big sigh. Now, start by bringing your arm down and then bringing your legs forward. You can roll back onto your back. I like to sit up in between rounds. And so in sitting up, and you can take your time, by the way, but in sitting up, we give ourselves just a chance to sort of let the spine readjust. Oh, and it feels interesting to me to kind of feel that tendency to lean in that direction and rinse out any neck or shoulder issues. And that's easier for me to do sitting up. Now, if you found that the greater trochanter of your femur, this is the pokey part of the bone that sticks out right there at on the hip, on the bottom side was uncomfortable, you can pad up that area when we do the other side. So if that was starting to feel overly pressured, I've got like a couple layers of carpet, a layer yoga mat. It's pretty soft over here, but it might be a little more firm on the floor at your house. So choose appropriately. Now, what has happened for me is that my spine has pretty much feels like it's neutral again. Like that initial sensation I had of leaning that way has returned to neutral. So that's how, I'm ready physically to move on. If you're not emotionally ready to move on, that's another thing altogether. But we're going to do the other side if you're up for it. So I'm going to reposition my blanket a little bit on this side of my mat so I have room to stretch out over here. And then I'm going to lay myself over. And again, we're just going to do all those little preparations. Get yourself a pillow, make yourself some room to stretch into it. And then we'll go. Okay, so rib cage over the blanket. And then kind of decide where that should go based on the bones and how it feels. I like it to be right under the ribs. And then we're going to, if your head is fine hanging down or on your arm, that's good. If you're like me and you want a little pillow under there, do that. You can bend the bottom knee so that the leg is bent and then the top leg is the straight leg, or you can have both legs straight. Oh, you might need to extend into the space. And then this top arm might drape over the ear. Or it might go out in front or over their back even. Take a nice big breath and let yourself sigh into it. Letting go of any tension or, just sometimes just moving around and settling in generates a little bit of tension. So relaxing the face, relaxing the eyes. Letting yourself melt into the pose, if that metaphor works for you. Stay for about another minute. So we're going to take a nice big breath. Let go with a big ah. The first thing you'll do is return your arm. And then you might bring the legs up front. And again, if you are like me and that felt good to sit up, that's where you're heading, nice and slow. If you liked it better on your back, you can do it that way as well. And then once you're sitting up, oh, you can pause and release any just little discoveries that you may have from having had your arm over your head or your head in that position. It feels interesting. It doesn't hurt for me, at least right now, but it definitely feels interesting. There's a kind of different sensation. It's fun to move those areas. Okay. So we're going to settle into a half butterfly to start here. So one leg is going to be bent like a little butterfly wing, and then the other leg is going to be straight. And then you can choose with your half butterfly to come back to that side stretch if that is feeling really good and you want to hang longer with a side stretch. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to fold forward. So to do that, I move my sit bone back a little bit so it sort of swings me towards my leg, and then I'm going to fold. And we're going for this really soft roundness, letting this leg get really soft. So if the case is that when you do that, it would be helpful to have some props, a blanket under your hips, something under your knee, something under this knee. Then set yourself up with the props. I find it very helpful to have a headrest so that as I'm folding over, and it might take more than one prop, but I have a little place to rest my forehead. I leave a little bit of room there for me to breathe. And I find that useful. So if that's helpful for you. And so folding in, figuring out your yoga poses and your yoga prop stack. Taking a nice deep breath, and sometimes, just finding that way of letting go once you've adjusted yourself is the step to take. Sometimes you take that big breath and you settle in and you realize, oh, I need one more prop or one less prop. So fix it and then come back again. And now with the forward bend for me, this is the different shape. We've done a little bit of a back bendy shape. We've done these side bendy shapes. So the forward bendy shape is hitting me more like the shapes we've already done have been very spicy, or not very spicy, but mildly spicy around my ribs, upper back, chest. Whereas this is a song about my lower back. And so I'm noticing that and enjoying it, but if for you it's too spicy, you want to back off a little bit. So we're going to stay for about 30 more seconds. Take a nice big breath. Let go with a big sigh. And then we're going to float ourselves up. Now lean back a bit, and you can straighten out the leg that you just had bent. We're going to bend that knee again in just a moment, but it helps to kind of give it a rinse. So we're going to transition this shape into what's called the half saddle. And this, you might recognize the shape more as a hero pose. So to do it, I'm going to take that leg that was bent out and I'm going to bring it under. Now, when I do this, I cannot bring my foot up to my hip. If you can get your foot snuggled into your hip, you will have an opportunity to go straight back in this pose. For me, because my foot won't come in, it turns my femur bone inward. That means I'm going to lean to my side so I can match my hip and knee. So I'm going this direction. You may be going straight back, okay? I also sometimes find, especially if you have tight ankles, that it's very helpful to take your blanket, and you might open it just a little bit, but putting a blanket underneath the shin can help the top of the ankle and the knee sometimes even feel a little bit better in this pose. Okay, so now I'm going to lean backwards, and I'm going back enough that I feel sensation on the top of this thigh. And for me, this is enough, right? So I can build a little stack of yoga props behind me to rest into. If you've got a nice big yoga bolster, those are delicious. You can put them underneath your back or even underneath your hip so that you've got a little more support there. So what I'm looking for is a sensation on the top of the thigh, but I'm not looking for any pain in my knee joint especially. And if you get little nagging sensations in your knee, listen to those. You may need to tilt your pelvis a little bit more or bring your foot out or knee out a little bit more to find the right alignment for you. And then once you've got something you can kind of work with, and I'm just going to stay propped up on my elbow, leaning back into my little prop, my little prop mountain here. And then just breathe. And just notice the kind of interesting sensation here, because the muscles that run in this area are very interesting. The quadriceps and the way they overlap. Sometimes when I take a deep breath, I can sort of feel the fibery areas where the muscles are and sort of feel that patterning. It's possible that I'm making that up. I have a vivid imagination, but I think I can. And just allowing ourselves to relax into the shape as best you can. This one might be a little spicier. Now, if you're a very hyper flexible or very mobile person, you may find that this pose is not very spicy. And a way that you could find the sensation on the top of the thigh if you're not feeling anything at all would be to actually elevate the pelvis so that your pelvis is up, and then as you're laying back onto the floor, there's a little bit more elevation to draw these. The quadriceps are part of the hip flexor array. There's a lot of different muscles that actually help flex the hips. The quads are one of them. We're trying to stretch that area. If you lift up and there's more of a extension at the hip joint, you're going to feel more stretch in that muscle. So you can play with that. I will suggest that if you are hypermobile, that be kind to yourself, because your body, as it ages, will be more prone to instability. And so you don't necessarily always want to go for the most possible sensation you can get. Find just that thread of sensation and pause with it. We're more interested in hydration than we are in trying to make ourselves bigger or a greater range of motion. All right, so we have 1 minute left here. So we've got about 2 more deep breaths just hanging out in the pose. Then you're going to exhale. Now squeeze your 2 thighs together. So bring the long leg towards the bent knee. Roll to your side so your knee is supported by your leg, and then gently extend the leg out. I find that the most gentle way to come out for knees. There's other ways, and if it works fine for you, that's good. But that's the most gentle way that I find to get that knee out of that pose, because the femur bone is supported by the bottom femur bone. The knee joint can work really smoothly. Okay, now that leg is going to stay straight, but you might want to take a moment and rinse out your ankle and kind of jiggle the thigh. The next pose we're going to do is the swan pose, and I'm going to use the leg that was extended. That's going to now be my bent leg. So I'm actually still going to be stretching this area out straight, okay? So to come into the swan, one leg is this bent leg here. You've got a back leg behind you, and you're going to just see how far towards this pose you can get. This leg may need to go out to the side. You might want a pillow under your hip or a blanket. And this pose might just not be approachable at all, and you can flip it upside down. So to flip it upside down, you take your leg and just bring it in. And you can hold it like this with this leg extended, or you can hold it like this with this leg coming in toward you, okay? So that's, you'll figure that one out. You decide what's best for you. And if you're in the version of the swan that puts you face down, just make sure that there's no sharpshooting sensations, especially in your joints. Those are usually easy. The body usually jerks us out of those, but more mysterious and challenging sensations are like heat or a burning sensation. That's also an indication of joint damage. So if you feel that, get out of the shape and try a different version. Okay, so your pigeon can get a little twisty, or swan. In the yin world, we call it a swan. But it can be a little twisty where you kind of almost lay on your side. You can twist the opposite direction. You can go straight down, or you can stay propped up. So I'm going to do this little bit of a twist with my arm over my back. And then let yourself get heavy and relaxed. So whatever choices you've made. Try to unwind the muscles around your mouth and around your eyes. Those are little places that I consider kind of telltale places, or telltale places. Because when I'm carrying tension in my body, those places are always holding. And if I'm in too deep, those places are always holding on. So I'm going to spend about 30 more seconds with my top arm in this position, or my arm in this position, and then I'm going to take the arm out. Shoulders and arms are not as, the tissue layers are not as deep, and so we don't need quite as long with those particular areas. So for me, it would help to just do a little bit of movement there first, and then let the arm relax. And if for you, you're still liking that, you can stay. It's like Vegas on your mat. What happens on there stays on there. So we're inside the last minute now. Trying to stay as relaxed in the inner part of the body, the way the nervous system feels, and the overall tone of a pose, just staying as relaxed as possible there. All right, yogis, going to take a nice big breath, and we're going to come out of there. Oh, bring that back leg around. Now, oh, give it a little rinse. Oh. So we're going to pretty much do the same thing going the other way. About 3 minutes per pose. So taking that butterfly again on the opposite side. If you need a little bit more time, take a little more time to rinse yourself out. Oh, I don't like to rush, but you know, it's the middle of the day. You might have things to do. So folding forward into your butterfly. Taking nice deep breaths. We've got about 1 more minute here. Hopefully you can hear me. Letting yourself soften through the neck and the face. It's just a couple more breaths. Inhale your way up. And then you'll let yourself kind of rinse that out. Oh. We're going to do the half saddle on the opposite side. So allowing that leg to come around, adjusting as you like with the props. Maybe you can lay straight back. Maybe you're going to be like me and you're going to go a little bit to the side. And you just go to the point where you feel that, and then if there's more room, then you take more room, right? Sometimes I like my legs closer together. Sometimes a little bit more distance feels nice. So you can explore that. Nice deep breaths, yogis. Starting to feel a little softening of the tissue there. So I'm going to take my elbow a little lower down, see if I can come down a tiny notch more. We're halfway through here. Since our last 30 seconds, just breathe in, potentially listening to the sound of my trash truck outside. It's not mine, but you get the idea. Sometimes I find it useful to know that there's still a schedule going on out there in the world. All right, so taking a nice deep breath, letting go with a really big, we're going to glue the thighs together, roll, or you can come out in the way that makes sense to you. Give that leg a little rinse, especially the ankle, if that's a sensitive place for you. And then we're going to come into our swan on this side. So the leg that was straight is now the bent leg. There are some variations to the swan that you can choose. The leg can be more straight or more bent. You can be propped up or propped down. And so kind of finding the right shape for you. Maybe you liked that twisty shape with one arm over the back. Maybe it's a more upright shape. I like to get into a pose and then feel. And then based on kind of how my body responds, does it feel good, inviting, softer? Then I might stay with that for a bit. If I don't like that, I'll try another slightly different variation to the pose. But always, once you settle somewhere, start relaxing and letting go, especially around the face, the jaw. Take deep breaths, nice and smooth. Deep rhythmic breathing is actually one of the most powerful aspects of yoga practice, and it's one of the ones that really helps us with coming into a state of more presence, a little less forward thinking or backward thinking. And so just noticing, focusing, and paying attention to a nice, deep, smooth breath. And we're halfway through here, so we just have a wee bit longer. So inside of that last 30 seconds, take a nice deep breath. Exhale out with a big ah. And then if you're on your back, you pretty much could just decide to stay there and turn this into Shavasana. If you're face down, you might bring that back leg around, kind of slowly unwind that pose. And then if you have a few more moments, you could pause for a meditation, or if you're on your lunch break, you can go grab yourself something to eat and get back to work, having had this little bit of refreshment in the middle of the day. So thank you so much for joining me for a brief journey into Yin Yoga. Namaste, yogis.